You're listening to the Scaling Culture podcast, where we sit down with thought leaders who share their experiences with building incredible cultures. On today's episode, we sit down with Bill Higgs, or as his friends like to call him, Mr. Mustang. Bill is the founder of Mustang Engineering and the author of Mustang the Story, as well as Culture Code Champions. Bill speaks to us today about how his experience in the military led to his passion for culture and how he created his culture code.
Bill, welcome to the Scaling Culture podcast. Really excited to have you on today, and thanks for accepting our invite.
I think it'll be a lot of fun.
This is the plan. We always have lots of fun, that's for sure. So yeah. You're in, you said North Carolina?
Yeah, Charlotte, North Carolina, right on the border of South Carolina.
Okay, what's the lay of the land down there? Give me the COVID update quickly.
It's pretty nice. We're in horse country, so it's rolling hills. We're sort of out of the city, so COVID's not too bad down here at all.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to jump into it. Bill, tell me how you got so invested in culture. Walk me through that. How did that all start?
I don't know. It might have started back when I was a Boy Scout, and we just had a culture in there. Probably due to becoming an Eagle Scout, I ended up at West Point, United States Military Academy. Really tight-knit culture there within your class where you take care of each other. Then in the Army, I was in the Airborne Ranger units, which were very tight-knit, had a culture. You cross-trained, you were bonded, you were really tight. After 5 years, I got out of the Army. I was in civilian life, and people just worked and went home. And I didn't have that camaraderie. So when we started our company in Houston, Mustang Engineering, designing offshore oil platforms, I wanted to have a bonded, tight-knit unit. And that's not the way it was in Houston. People moved to wherever the jobs were. We went into a 10-year downturn due to the oil price.
Wow.
There was no loyalty between companies and people, or people and companies. It was survival of each individual person, each individual company. So just was horrible. And yeah. I wanted to change that reality.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so when did you write your first book?
Well, it took that company from 87 to 2008. We went from zero to $1 billion in annual revenue, which was pretty crazy. We wanted to have a 35-person company when we started. Ended up at 6,500 and trained second and third generation. They took it to $2 billion 4 years later. When they hit $2 billion, then I wrote a book called Mustang the Story, sort of like our concept for starting the company, how we were going to be focused on a culture of people taking care of people, whether that was the client or the supplier or the other people within our company, called Mustangers. And then my kids beat me up. They said, "Dad, that book puts people to sleep."
Oh, wow.
and both my kids have their own companies. And they said, "Dad, all those gold nuggets you taught us growing up as in the Mustang environment, you need a business book that just shows people how to do that." Because we did it in 8 different industries. We did it in 12 international offices, and it worked every time. It's working in my kids' businesses. So that's where I did Culture Code Champions, 7 Steps to Scale and Succeed in Your Business. That came out in January. It's a Forbes Books author book. And so I've got some pretty good backing of them feeling that I'm an authority on culture, due to what we did in keeping people together through some major downturns like we're looking at right now. We have those about every 4 years in the oil patch. Right.
Yeah. Well, look, let's go to that book for a sec. So give us an overview of those steps, Bill, if you will.
Well, it's all about, starts out with communication. So first step is get communication going top to bottom in your organization. Do some outside activities, do some activities over lunch.
Bill, what's the number one thing to get that communication from the C-level boardroom? If you have a 15-layer company, it needs to go to a frontliner. How do you push that right down to the front lines?
Well, what I found helped a lot is having activities. So one of my favorite ones is to do a paper airplane flying contest over lunch.
Love it.
And so I'd get a cross section of people to head that up. So I'd be busting the silos in the company between departments, get those people together. They would set the rules. They would publicize it. People would go home. They would build these paper airplanes with their families over the kitchen table. So now I'm trying to get the hearts and the minds of the family into the company. Then you'd have the competition, be lots of awards and things. You'd take pictures. One of the things I found in every downturn, the thing that spiraled downturns in the wrong direction was the coffee bar. People would meet at the coffee bar and they'd go, oh, it's so bad. Hey, have you heard where there's a project in Houston? You know, where are they paying X amount?
So a coffee bar being the internal coffee stand at the company or a coffee shop or?
No, right there within the company on the floor.
Right.
And so what I wanted is I wanted my sales and marketing people to do internal sales and marketing to keep our people. So they'd put up pictures of activities, announcing things coming up, and put positive things up for people to talk about at the coffee bar. And then that positive attitude would go with them, even when we were in a downturn.
Got it.
So opening communications is critical. And then getting that sense of bonding. So in the Rangers, I was 1st Cavalry Division. You have a patch, you have a song, you have a hand sign. At Mustang, we even had a mascot, a blue horse mascot that people could wear to functions or whatever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But do those types of things and also do swag. Swag, which is like trinkets, hats, T-shirts, things like that, would always go to clients. We made sure all that stuff got into our people and that toys got in the toy box at the house.
Right.
And so you're just
integrating the family.
Again, it's subliminal, but the people are thinking, wow, they're treating us as important as they do their clients. And that's when they start feeling that, then you're building that trust bridge that can really take you to a new level.
When you're treating your employees as well as you would your clients.
Right. And we did it for everyone. So we would have some contract people, but contract people were included in everything. They got bonuses, everything, just as if they were a direct hire employee. And people would say, why are you doing that for contract people? But they're working just as hard as everybody else. We didn't discriminate against them.
Wow. That's excellent. And so did this stuff, it sounds like this would have started on onboarding. Is that when it begins? And what does the first day look like at your company?
Absolutely. Onboarding is totally key. We had what we called a new hire breakfast. So we would get a group of new hires together, the founders, myself and my partner, top leadership would be at that breakfast. And we'd go around and ask them where they came from, what project they're on, what they're doing. And we would spin off of that to talk about our culture and what we were trying to do to have good communication and really work handoffs between people. And one of the things we always asked, and I call this Operation Horse Thief.
Horse Thief?
Horse Thief, because we were a Mustang, we're a horse company.
Oh, yeah.
So we had Operation Horse Thief. We would say, who are the 5 best people that you know in this industry? And we get that list from them, and that would go on our list of horses that we wanted to go steal. Because obviously they would have our DNA. They would want to work the way we work.
Right.
So if you think about it, a lot of companies, HR's sorting through resumes and identifying people. When I was 100 people strong, I had 100 people looking for the next Mustanger. When I was 1,000 people, I had 1,000 people looking for the next Mustanger and identifying them. Wow. So in terms of being able to scale a company, think of the power of that when all of a sudden you hit a bunch of work and you say, hey, pull out the stops. We need 80 more people. I could get them, and I could get them where they're already have our DNA coming in.
They'd have the DNA. They'd have the relationships.
They would know somebody. Somebody would be bought into bringing them in and introducing them around. And so it was very positive right from day one when they would start. The other thing we did is from 7:30 in the morning until 8:45, they were processed. And then they were in an office with a goodie bag full of swag and fun stuff with their computer, with the project they were on, and they'd been introduced to their team. And they said it just made their head spin. Normally they go into a company and you sit around.
That was day one, Bill, correct?
Yeah, the first 2 hours.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Way different than sitting around for 4 days waiting for somebody to give you something to do.
Yeah. And what was some of the ROI you had with these activities? What was the direct return that you saw? You talked about, having someone who was a champion and would help you recruit. What are some of the other ROIs that you saw, return on investment of these types of activities?
Well, the reason I call the book Culture Code Champions is you need a champion for each one of the steps to help implement it. And what happens is you now are getting intentional about creating your culture. In Houston, the turnover annually in engineering firms and supplying companies was about 45%. Nationally, it's about 35 to 40%. Our turnover was less than 2%.
Wow.
In a city where they could go to 100 other engineering firms. Everybody's tugging on our people, but because of the culture, we didn't lose them. And so
pay was on scale. Was pay relevant to your competitors?
Pay had to be on scale.
Yeah.
We called them the big boys, the Brown and Roots and the Bechtels. So we had to pay even or a dollar more a year because people would compare W-2s at the end of the year.
Right.
So definitely competitive, but because of our efficiency and how we work, we had 4 times the bottom line profit. So most engineering firms were about 4 to 6% bottom line profit. We were 20 to 22% bottom line profit after giving bonuses and taking care of people. So that culture translates right into the bottom line because you're not having the turnover, you're not having the inefficiency. And due to that communication, we could do projects at a lower cost. So even though our rate schedule was the same, our actual cost to the client was less than our competitors. And our projects got out ahead of schedule. So it starts to feed on itself. And that's why we grew from 3 people to 6,500.
And Bill, let's go a little deeper there. Was that because your people were more engaged and so they were producing greater results? You didn't have the turnover, so there wasn't this messy handover when an employee left and had to hand the project to someone else. Break that down for me a little bit on why you were able to be so efficient and profitable.
Well, if you look at, even though we used our Operation Horse Thief hiring method, we still had a bell-shaped curve of people. Mm-hmm. So we're in the Houston market, same as the 100 other engineering firms. You have a bell-shaped curve of people, some low performers, some super performers, and a bunch of people in the middle.
Yep.
And all our culture did is we shifted that curve a little bit to the right, to a little bit higher performance from every person. So every person was contributing a little bit more than they did when they were at Brown and Root or Fluor or Bechtel or at one of our competitors.
Right.
And so that's shifting that curve by having better communication. So I say we built the whole company on good handoff. So anytime somebody's handing something to another person, we wanted them to go learn that other person's job to some extent, to where they understood how what they gave them would be used. That way they could make it more digestible to them right the first time. That was the whole focus. If we could get it right the first time and not redesign,
mm-hmm.
have problems in purchasing, we would be the better mousetrap. And so it was all on the handoffs.
That's great. And so how did you sustain it? You talked a lot about first day, the things that would happen. What else? What other activities would you do to continue to bring your culture to life and sustain a strong culture?
I think that one of the watershed moments is we went 10 years of a downturn in the oil price, and clients would not let us put a new high school or a new college grad on their project. They only wanted experienced people.
Wow.
Because they knew that's about what they could get. So I started a Young Guns program, and I just started hiring people, high school, college graduates. I would get a little creative on the resume as to what they had done as interns or whatever to show some experience. And that Young Guns program started out with 10 or 15 people a year. It became 100 to 200 people per year. And by year group, they got to know each other. So that busted silos because they were going into all the different departments from HR to project to electrical. So these young gun groups were cross-fertilizing. They were also gung-ho, had a lot of energy, could help a lot with activities. And then when we got into doing a lot in the community in terms of volunteer work, they could grab a hold of those and help us. And all of them had mentors. So older, more established people were mentoring them. And these young people made those mentors get up on their toes with the questions they were asking.
Right.
And why this, why that? And it just, that's what helped sustain us. When we retired in 2008, young gun people were in charge of everything from CEO down. People
Right.
who had gone through the Young Guns program were in charge of everything, taking it from 1 billion to 2 billion.
And what were some of the traits of these, call it super performers, people that obviously helped you separate yourselves from the competitors? What were they doing versus these B and C players? What were the super performers doing?
Well, I think I always say I wanted people that are other-oriented. And we used a term, we said, making heroes. We wanted everybody to be making heroes of the people that they work with within the company, but then also making heroes of the suppliers. So give good information to the suppliers to where they can get it right the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then make heroes of your clients. So get the information out of the client, figure out what's really driving their success, and make sure that we deliver that. And so the super performers were other-oriented. They were focused on making heroes, but then they were able to communicate how they did that to where each of them could grab 10 other people and get them moving in that direction. So it was top to bottom leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We were building leaders of character way down in the organization. One of the things I like that you did is that you were taking blue collar people, and I love your book. You had outrageous empowerment of your blue collar people. So in the Army, the NCOs, the non-commissioned officers, the sergeants, those are the backbone of the Army. The officers come and go, but that backbone's what drives it. In an engineering firm, the backbone is the drafters and designers, because they're doing the drawings that go out the door. But they were treated like second-class citizens in most engineering firms. We raised them to a level of professionalism because they normally kept all their books in boxes because they were just like migrant workers traveling to where the projects were. We got them to a level of professionalism where they unpacked. And I just had our first ever designer we hired just retired after 33 years. So these people found a home. They were well respected. They stayed long term. And that was a big change in lowering that turnover rate. Yeah.
Right. And profitability. And
absolutely.
Look, that's incredible. Let me rewind a little bit. You obviously had transformed some people internally. Tell me more about how would you screen? How did you find the right people? There seems to be, it seems to be difficult for a lot of organizations to say, look, we know we need this role and the skills for that role. It's more challenging. It seems to be more challenging to screen for culture. Can you talk about that?
I think it is, but like, I'll give you an example. I was going to hire my first salesperson after about 7 years. I was the only salesy person in the company, but I
bet you were good, Bill. I bet you were good. You had a gun and you were on a horse selling things. That's how I picture you.
That's right. Here comes Mr. Mustang. Look out.
That's right.
But I just put the word out in the company that I needed to hire a salesperson. And one of my top project managers came and said, Bill, I've worked with a guy for 15 years at this other company. He's been let go, and he would totally fit in with this company. Interviewed him, hired him, stayed 22 years, went from sales into contracts.
Tell me about the interview. Like how did you ensure that he was going to be a fit? Sure, a colleague said, look, this person's going to be great. I'm sure I'm going to vouch for them. What does that look like? What does the screening process look like?
Well, the thing that we did, because we were very adverse to overhead, and this was going to be an overhead position. So I knew my partners needed to be aligned with hiring this person. So we had them interviewed by 3 of the department heads that had been there a long time. And
Okay.
I say they bled blue. Our color was Mustang blue. They bled blue.
So they were culturally aligned. You were very confident that they were aligned.
And so they could ask the right questions. My partner could ask the right questions. And I was in a situation where when I was hiring this person in, I was hiring them in when we did not need work. So there'd be no pressure on him to deliver in the first 2 months because we had a good backlog. So we could get him to understand how we sold because we only wanted win-win sales. And he came from a company where they'd sell even if they weren't good at the project. And I said, that's not us. We want to be the right answer, or we want to help that client find the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a couple of months to get somebody to understand sort of into their body what your culture is like and how you want to deal with clients and deal in the industry. So we had the time to work that, but from the interview process, the people all said, oh yeah, this is the right person. They're other oriented, they communicate well, they've got empathy. And so you could tell it was the right type of person.
Right.
We just had to build them into the type of salesperson that we wanted.
And did you have a set of values back then? Did you have 3 to 5 core values with sub-language? What was the foundation of the culture?
But we had a vision statement, and our vision statement would actually work in any company. And our vision statement was, our quest is to embody a culture that inspires super motivated people to make heroes of clients, suppliers, and other Mustangers. So it was a quest. Like, we're never going to be done with this. We're always going to be trying to create this culture. And we're thinking that we only have super motivated people. And if that doesn't match you, people actually wouldn't last long. It was a self-cleansing culture.
Okay.
If the person couldn't get on board with that, couldn't produce, wouldn't communicate,
couldn't become a hero.
Upper management didn't have to clear them out. They got cleared out down at the level where they were. But then the making heroes was right in it. And so you would hear that term throughout the company. And then we did have a set of core values. When we did the core values, my partner and I were there from the beginning when there was no work. So we have a lot of scars from the startup. When we did the core values, there were like 20 words up there, and we boiled it down to like 6. And what bugged my partner and I is the term or the word innovation was not selected by the management team. And so we preempted them and said, we're at an innovation. You guys may not understand it, but we're innovating across the industry with our culture, and that's our key differentiator.
Right.
But it surprised us to hear 6 years in, people had already lost sight of what we were like in the first 2 years. And so that made us realize we've got to keep telling that story and keep people, I call it lean and mean. That's sort of an Army term, but stay lean and mean in a good time so that we never went down. We went through 12 downturns, and we never went down with the industry. So.
And so, look, it sounds like there was a ton of change, huge roller coaster ride,
Awesome.
In that industry. How did you create a culture of change where people knew, oh my goodness, whether it was every 3 years, 4 years, big changes coming? Change is one of the hardest things to bring people through. How do you create a culture of change?
We had a term. So you'll see I've got a lot of 1 and 2 word terms.
I love it.
And this one was Mustang Motion. We called it the Mustang Motion. We had a song sung to the locomotion.
Can you sing it for us, Bill?
Everybody's doing a brand new dance now.
Look at you go.
Come on, baby, do the Mustang Motion. We had a dance and everything. But we moved people all the time. Every 2 or 3 months, they're moving offices. It's changing. We went from manual drafting to computer drafting. imagine the change in teaching your people to go from manual drafting to computer drafting.
So how do you build that in the culture? How do you get people to embrace that huge change? These are massive changes.
Well, we got them so used to changing the team they're on, changing the people they're working with, changing the environment where they were, that when big changes would come, they would really just laugh at them and crank right through it. So we were in the offshore oil industry, very tough because they're drilling wells while you're designing. And I remember one project, they're drilling a new well and it changes the whole process. We need different equipment things, and we're into piping in the fabrication yard. Wow. Normally you would shut that job down for 3 months, re-engineer it, and then get started up, and you'd have a 6-month delay in the project.
Right.
We got the team together, worked over a weekend, had the process figured out. By Wednesday, we had ordered the new equipment from people who were already supplying stuff. 2 weeks later, the drawings were in the fab yard. We didn't even slow down, didn't change the end date for the client. But most people would have just frozen. Our people said, oh, it's a change. How do we crank it through? And because our suppliers and our clients were included in our team, we could just make it happen.
Right.
But it's like you have to create, I think from the top, it was top to bottom. People were always moving, and we would not let them build turf. There was no turf building in the company. And we were very transparent. So the communication channels can be power channels in a company. We broadly communicated. We were down in with the people. We were at the activities with the people. They could ask us anything. They could ask leadership anything. And I think one of the things that would happen during the onboarding process, old-time Mustangers would tell the new people, most of the time when management says something, you figure out what the opposite of that is, and that's reality.
Right.
This is a different type of company. If management says this is the way it is, that really is the way it is.
Right.
If we saw a downturn coming, we would tell the people.
Very
hey,
transparent.
Yeah, we see it coming. This is what we're doing to get ready for it. You need to do your part to get ready for it.
Right, right. So transparency sounds like it was key here. Was you had the same information we have.
Yes, and and by being that way, you never had to worry about what you had told somebody in the past, because no matter what the situation was, you're going to say the same thing and react the same way. So there's no like politics in our body, and therefore there was no politics really in the body of the company.
You know, it was interesting. I had spoke to Holly Delaney, who's on our board. She's the director of HR at Zappos, people and culture over there. And she said when they go through big change, the leadership, there's two things that really stood out. One, instead of, standing up over everybody, they would really sit down and get to their level. And the second thing was they talked about what they were transparent about the message, but started with what they were concerned about. They brought their own fears to the conversation, i.e. we're heading down this path, but here's also what we're nervous about. Here's what I'm thinking about, what's keeping me up at night. I love that. Would you say that's too far, or would that be in line with how you would push out that message?
Well, I think that's really important because it's lonely at the top.
Yeah, right,
you
right.
feel like you can't talk about some of the nitty-gritty things. And I remember after we had turned over to second generation leadership, we were going into a downturn. And at that point, I'm just attending the meetings to watch and listen. And the new head was talking about how bad this downturn was going to be, and we're going to have to let go of this and do this and do this. And it was all like, I call it Debbie Downer,
right.
the way he was talking. And so afterwards, I got with him and I said, hey, those things that you said are true, but it's how you present it. You can present it from a positive standpoint, or you can present it as a negative. And your job as the leader is to be trying to spiral people up.
Right.
So if nothing else, you're going to get them to neutral. But if you're spiraling down, they're going to go down further than wherever you are.
They will follow the leader down. Right.
And it was very interesting to watch him change over the next 3 weeks. And then the CEO after him was a lady, Michelle McNichol. And she'd been in the company 20 years had come up from project engineer all the way up to CEO. And when she went into a downturn, it's like she knew it. It was in her bloodstream. And how she went into it, how she set it up, how she talked to the people was the way my partner and I did it. And it was, hey, I'm going to be positive. Here's the positive steps we're going to do. Here's the actions we can do. You be looking at what actions you can do to change this outcome.
Right,
and,
right.
And I think that's a key thing, similar to what you were saying.
A few other questions. I wanted to talk to you. One of your messages in your book, one of the 7 steps, is use hard copy communication. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, everybody's in this digital world, and they think that you don't really need hard copy anymore. One of the things we had was like a 2-foot by 3-foot calendar with Mustang at the top and a pencil that you could write and plan on. Those calendars went out to clients, suppliers, and most everybody at the company hung one up in their office. It had the big blue horse on it. The clients would plan major projects on those calendars. Our competitors would come into their conference rooms working on a project, and they're all planning on a big blue horse calendar.
Oh, and great.
I had other sales guys call me up and say, hey, you're killing me. I was in a client's office, an 8x10 office, and half the wall is covered with your calendar.
Oh, I love it.
But hard copy works. But the biggest thing we did is the monthly newsletter that we did. We sent it to the house. So many people do a digital newsletter, send it out.
That's great.
People read the first paragraph and delete it, or they look at some titles and hit delete.
So print and send to the house.
Print and send it. The spouse will read everything in there because they want to know what's going on at the company where their husband or wife is working. If there's pictures of the kids in there, that newsletter's staying on the dining room table for the kids.
Gold. That is gold.
But it also showed things that are coming up. So it's, hey, we want to go to that skating party. And like I would dress up like the Grinch to read a Christmas story to the kids. And my secretary would paint me green and I looked like the Grinch. But that became like an annual thing and the families would want to go there. What happens there is that hard copies went in the hearts and the minds of the family. So now it's easier for the employee. They have to work a little late or they need to come in on a weekend. They've got that family support going, hey, this is the best job you've ever been in. Yeah, go take care of that company. They're taking good care of you. But hard copy, and then the other thing is swag, like the trinkets and things, the toys that we would hand out at birthday parties. We called it the Mustang Fairy would come around at 2 in the morning and just put things on people's desks out of the blue. So they come in the morning. And what I wanted to do is put a smile on a person's face and create a memory. So they walk in the morning, maybe didn't have a good morning getting the kids off to school. And here's this cool thing on their desk out of the blue, puts a smile on their face. They're taking it home. The kids or their spouse that night, they're talking about what happened at work. If you can create those memories through activities or whatever and put smiles on people's faces, that's spiraling attitudes up. And it's just infectious. It works.
I love it. So it sounds like surprise as well as incorporate the family. I think we always just see what's in front of us, i.e. the employees. And in some cases, take for granted the broader, the employee's family, what's behind the curtain. I love that. That's great.
That newsletter gives you just that touch.
That's right.
All the time, continuous touches. Right?
That's great. I want to talk about your experience around when someone couldn't align with the culture. And I know you said, look, the organization would just flush those people out.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that. What did your leadership, how would those conversations go? Someone didn't align. What was walk me through that process. Hey, Bill, this isn't working based on ABC. And then that final goodbye. Can you give us a taste of what that was like?
Yeah, so what would happen is it would float up. Hey, this person's not working out. And so their peers would be telling the boss, this person's not working. That boss would come visit with them on why it wasn't working and talk about the culture and how we were a little bit different. And you've got the right skills, but you're not interacting you're not a team player. You're not helping the team perform. And this is what we think you need to do to straighten up. If it didn't work, they would also look at that person's skills to see if, is there another place? Like sometimes it might be a personality difference between that person and a project manager.
Right.
And if they could identify that, they would shift that person, say, hey, we're going to move you to this other project team or into this other department where we think you'll be able to perform. But this is like a second chance. And
right.
Here's what you need to be doing.
Did that work out a lot of times, or was it?
A lot of times it did work. And we saved really good people that way.
Mm-hmm.
We also did what I called morphing in the organization. Again, I'm giving you Higgs terms here.
This is great.
But we would morph. So if we thought a person could move up a level from where they were, we would move them up that level, but we would not announce it. We would just ease them into that position where now they're leading, say, 5 or 6 people. And by not announcing it, it would just sort of happen. And if it worked out, great. If they got into that position and all of a sudden they weren't performing, we could move them back down without losing somebody that we had invested in. That was, to me, that was huge in reducing turnover because that person saw that we tried to advance them. They saw that they did not have the right skill set yet. We were able to save them, but then we were able to talk to them about what skills they needed to get to move to that position. And so that morphing of the organization, if you would announce it and that person's in it, there's the bad thing about a really tight culture, we would bring in like a super project manager from outside and our people would cut their knees out.
Right. Because
they didn't act like a Mustang. What we ended up doing is we would bring a top project manager in and put them 2 levels down into a project. So they're way overpaid. Nobody knows that. But we knew they had the skills to run that project. We let them earn their stripes with the people, and then we just floated them up to project manager. That was a lesson learned from wiping out with about 3 really top-notch project managers. Once we started doing that, like our third CEO, Steve Knowles, worked for Chevron, was a top guy at Chevron. We brought him in 3 levels down into a project. He not only floated to the top of the project, then he floated to in charge of the department, floated up to
great way to integrate a
CEO.
Leader.
Yeah, but it's understanding that your culture, it can also be hard to get into.
Yeah.
And so you have to recognize that and find a way to get people into where they get accepted, and then their natural leadership abilities and technical skills can float them up.
Right. Yeah. And what do you think in general, you talk a lot about the cost of a bad culture. What is that? Is there a percentage? You know, how should people be calculating it? Talk to me about that a little bit.
That's the big mystery out there. You want this culture, but does it pay for itself? So at my website, culturecodechampions.com, I have 2 free tools there. One's a culture assessment. So for the 7 steps, you can figure out where you're strong, where you're weak.
Okay, great.
But then I also have a culture calculator where you can plug, your HR person can plug in your people, average salaries, and it'll show how they could change the bottom line. So for us, our competition was 4 to 6% bottom line profit. We were 20 to 22%.
Wow.
I've gone very conservative because even with people implementing all 7 steps, if they do a pretty decent job, I went conservative and I say you can only add about 5%. So if you're a bottom line 6% company, you could go to bottom line 11%, but it's with your same revenue, your same people, your same clients. All you've done is changed your culture. That's big bucks. And so when HR runs that number, then they can go into the C-suite and say, hey, we want to start implementing these 7 steps. And here's the ones we think we need the most help on. And these culture steps are super cheap. There's like almost negligible dollars. It's more getting people to put the energy in and focus on it and get engaged. So it's not a big dollar thing, but it's a big, be working on it, creating these habits in your daily routine.
Consistency, right.
Thing. Yeah.
Bill, that's great.
It's a big cost change. Yeah.
What about, I want to end with, and I'm sure you've been talking to lots of your peers in a time like now during this COVID-19 crisis. What's the number one thing or top few things that people need to be doing at this time to strengthen culture?
Well, as I say, we went through some huge downturns in the oil patch. Some of them overnight, like 2 weeks ago when the oil price went down to $20.
Right.
In Houston right now, that's blood in the streets. I mean, hundreds of companies go under when that oil price happens like that. What I try to do, and everybody's doing the first 2 steps of Culture Code Champions right now. Their bosses are communicating well with their people. They know their families. They know what's going on. So the communication is there, and there's more of a bonding than there's ever been. Hey, we're holding hands. We're going to get through this thing together.
Right.
Well, what we did in every downturn is you're trying to plug all the holes in the bucket. Okay, so you have revenue coming in into the bucket, and there's holes in the bucket. Same in families. You got holes in the bucket. Everybody's plugging those and trying to conserve cash, whether it's in your family or in your company. Take notes on those. We took notes in downturns as to what we did to survive them. We cross-trained people so that we could work with fewer people.
Right.
So when you come out, okay, you've done step 1, step 2 of Culture Code Champions. Now, while you're here and you're prepping to come out, identify how you're going to do the other steps as you come out, because everybody's going to be listening to you. Everybody's going to want to put that company back together. This is the opportune time to change your culture to where you want to go. There won't be a better time. And that always happened to us coming out of downturns. We were very strong, and then you're starting to hire and you're starting to scale up, but you're bringing people in, and what we called it is, how do you stay lean in the good times? We weren't opening those holes in the buckets when we came out of the downturn.
Right.
And so when we hired people in, none of those frills and funny things were happening. We stayed lean in the good times. So the next downturn, we didn't go down. We would go flat, but we wouldn't go down. I call that no fate leadership, but it's all habits. You've got to create the habits. Culture is the big driver on those habits. And I think people are in an opportune time now over the next 2 months to set up for coming out.
Great. Look, that has been incredible. Bill, thanks for your time. Bill Higgs, author of Culture Code Champion. And thank you so much. We really appreciate your insight, your experience, and your thoughts in today's podcast. Thanks so much, Bill.